I'm not sure why. Nonetheless, thank you for the introduction. And as mentioned, I'm Bill Kapralos, and I'm a professor at Ontario Tech University. And I'm part of the SingHealth group, which is a collective, an interdisciplinary group that is looking at applying and using technology within medical simulation. A lot of the work we do is focused in the virtual domain. We do a lot of 3D printing, which I'll give a brief snapshot of some of the work we do as well within the presentation. In the meantime, I'd like to thank the MedSG200 group for allowing me the opportunity to speak today. It's a great pleasure. So I'm going to provide a very brief overview. What I'm going to try to do today is motivate the use for immersive technologies in particular, including virtual reality, augmented reality, and serious games within the educational and medical educational domain in particular. I just want to make sure, I want to bring it all together and make everyone realize, which I probably don't have to because most people are probably convinced on this if you're in this session. But nonetheless, I'd like to bring it all together and make everyone realize that using, virtual reality, for example, is nothing really new, and it does make sense. And part of this relates to, there's this, fear of technology in general is nothing new. We've feared technology for thousands of years, dating back to the time of Socrates, for example, where he thought that the technology at the time, the stylus or the pen, when it was introduced to his students, he thought that it would have a negative effect on his students. So rather than having them listen to what he said, as was common at the time, he would talk and his students would listen. Students were taking notes, and he thought that that would interfere with what they remembered. Obviously, that's not the case. And the same thing happened with during the time of the printing presses back in the 1500s. When books started becoming abundant, there was this fear that we would be overloaded with information. And just to kind of set what I'm going to talk about into place, there's a great quote by a Canadian philosopher, from the early 1900s. Anyone who tries to make a distinction between education and entertainment doesn't know the first thing about either. In other words, there's no reason why learning and education in general cannot be fun. And in fact, it should be if it's going to be effective. So simulation, again, to this crowd, I probably don't have to talk about what simulation is. It's used in for medical training. Mannequins are a good example, where we have a model of a human, the mannequin, and we're able to perform essentially experiments on it. In other words, we're able to try various medical procedures. We can learn by doing, so to speak. And if we make mistakes, it's okay. We're not affecting a human. And in the process of making those mistakes, we're learning, and we're able to apply that learning into the real world on a actual patient. Again, nothing new. We've been, simulation has been used for, again, thousands of years. Started off with ancient Greek and Roman soldiers practicing their sword techniques on tree trunks. One of the first medical simulators was one back in the early 1500s. Madame du Coudray, who developed a pelvic simulator to train midwives on how to give birth. The military, again, a very big user of simulation. War games are an example of simulation used in the military. And the current focus on, both military and medical simulation is really on these immersive technologies, virtual and augmented reality in particular, in addition to serious gaming. And when we couple that with, some of the things that, the technology that we have, including 3D printing, we can actually create some really immersive and engaging and very effective training applications that are not only cost effective, but also safe and ethically safe as well. So let's look at very briefly play and games. And I'm going to start off with a quote from Einstein. Play is the highest form of research. In other words, when we're playing, there's actually a lot of learning that takes place. We're learning by playing. And if you don't believe this, or if you're not convinced, take a look at animals. In the animal world, there's no formal education. How do lion cubs, for example, learn to take down prey? Well, the techniques they use to take down prey when they're adults, eat and survive, they actually practice and they mimic amongst each other when they're cubs and they're playing. And if you look at this these images here on the two leftmost images, you see the lion cubs. They're not hurting each other, they're playing, yet they're practicing the techniques that an adult lion uses to take down prey, eat, and survive. So play is nothing more than an activity that we engage in strictly for fun or for enjoyment. We can combine play with some rules, and when we add rules to play, we have a game. And games are nothing new as well. We've been playing games. Humans have been playing games for thousands of years. They go back about 4,500 years to ancient Iraq and ancient Egypt, and they could go beyond that, probably even beyond that. But nonetheless, the games, Senate and the Royal Game of Ur, are roughly 4,500 years old each, and they've been used by people. They were used by people at the time. Games themselves, they're actually simulations themselves, and games have been used as simulations, again, to teach military strategy. A good example of that is chess, and there's many others. Chess was developed in 6th century Northwest India to teach, again, military strategy to military officers in India at the time. So we have games, or we have play, we have games, now we have video games. And video games are nothing more than games. However, the medium now changes. Rather than playing on a board or on a tabletop, for example, we're playing by manipulating images via a computer display, via a computer and a computer display. So video games are nothing more than games, except now the medium changes. They've become electronic, so to speak. And the first video game goes back to 1961, Space War. And the first commercial video game goes back to 1971, Computer Space. So roughly 50 years since video games became a commercial entity. And there's plenty of learning that actually occurs when we play video games. And if you don't believe me, take any video game, and it's going to take you some time before you start and reach the end of the video game. And you have to learn about how to overcome adversaries, how to get from one level to the other, how to, in some cases, how to jump, how to, attack and destroy your enemies, whatever the case may be. The point is, it doesn't happen. It's not a one-step process. It happens through trial and error. And typically we practice. And video games themselves are a huge business. In 2019, actually in 2020, the market was $170 billion. And, we're playing a lot of video games. And it's not only adolescents that are playing as they were in the past. It's male, female, and ages, and across, a wide range of demographics. Older people and older adults are playing video games. This then leads into serious games. And if video games are so engaging and so captivating, and we're playing them and we're spending hours and hours and hours playing them, obviously something is attracting us to them. I mean, I'll use kids, for example. They can play hours on end. Yet when you put them in front of a classroom, their attention, may last 40 minutes, 20 minutes, 40 minutes, maybe an hour. At some point, they start drifting away. Yet they're able to actually attend to something if they're interested in it, such as video games. So educators started looking at this, and they started tapping into video games and started applying them for educational purposes. So if we can tap into video games, take advantage of the motivating and engaging aspects that they provide, what if we take that and apply that to education and create a video game whose primary purpose is education in contrast to entertainment? And that's really what led to serious games. And serious games are video games whose primary purpose is educational. And they're able to captivate, motivate, and engage learners, just as video games are, except now we're doing it for educational purposes. And one of the first likely video games was Battlezone. It was in 1980, and it was used by the United States Army to train Army gunners. And the United States Army in general has been a huge proponent of video or of serious gaming and video game based training. Going back to the late 70s and early 80s, they saw the value of doing that. They saw that they can engage their soldiers, and it was a very valuable means of training. So we've been using simulations for thousands of years. We've been playing video games for thousands of years. Why not combine simulations and video games and use them for educational purposes? And that's exactly what serious games do. In other words, why can't learning be fun? And that's really what serious games, they tap into the fun aspect of learning, the fun, engaging, and immersive aspects of games applied to learning. Serious games it's becoming a very big market, and it's estimated by 2022 it'll be worth approximately $8 billion. And there's some big players in the United States, for example, Breakaway Games. They've created serious games that have costed millions of dollars. Pulse is one such example, developed by the Breakaway Games and the U.S. Navy. And some big players are coming into the scene. Ubisoft, the world's second biggest entertainment video game company, in March of 2015, they announced Dig Rush, and it was a therapeutic video game to treat amblyopia. The interesting thing about Dig Rush was that it was the first game that required a prescription. So a doctor prescribed the video game to a patient used it, and that helped them treat their amblyopia. And it was also the first video game to be, or serious game, to be recognized by, or approved by the FDA, sorry. Some other examples, they've been, there's many examples. I won't show videos here, just given time. But some of the work that I've done is related to serious games. We've created serious games for a wide range of medical procedures, including one of the first ones that I've been working on back in 2009, I guess. A serious game to train orthopedic surgery trainees on the procedure, the steps, and the tools required at each step of a total knee replacement procedure. And this was done, the motivation behind this was I was approached by orthopedic surgeons, a group of orthopedic surgeons, who had an issue with medical trainees coming into the operating room. These were, new medical trainees. They were ill-prepared, or not prepared enough, I should say, when they were coming in to their first knee replacement procedure. They were given books and manuals to read, and obviously a lot of them were not. So we decided to put that into a serious game and better motivate the trainees to be better, to go through the procedure in the virtual domain, and thus be better prepared when they come into the operating room for their first exposure. And we did do some studies with that, and we did find that for novice trainees, it was equally as effective as traditional media or their traditional training methods. Now, the nice thing about that was that in addition to being equally as effective, it was more motivating and more engaging, and therefore we found that students were more inclined to actually go through that procedure using the serious game as opposed to reading their textbooks. Another example is Foodbot Factory, and this was a game that was developed in conjunction with health nutrition experts at Ontario Tech University and Health Canada, and it was really to educate kids about nutrition. And this game is available in the Apple and Google stores, freely available. Moving into immersive technologies, immersive technologies are technologies that blur the line between the physical world and the digital or the simulated world, and thereby creating a sense of immersion. And, essentially it's become synonymous with virtual reality and augmented reality. Now, when we couple this and we're able to have these, headsets and interactive techniques, when we couple them with serious games and virtual simulations, it can lead to very engaging learning applications. And, there's a lot of hype recently about immersive technologies, and that really stems from the fact that we have some great technology available to us And with that technology, we can do some very impressive things. We can keep track, we can track a user in the virtual world. We can create stereoscopic 3D imagery by using a headset, for example. And we're able to track. We can track our hands, and we can perform complex and intricate procedures with our hands as opposed to using a mouse and keyboard as traditionally done. And that has really revolutionized the whole space, the virtual training space. And it has been suggested that virtual reality and augmented reality in particular will drive a revolution in medical education and patient care. And there's a lot of examples of where we use immersive tech, not only to train, the future doctors or even current doctors and medical professionals, but we also use it in patient care. I've done some work that has looked at educating patients before they go into a complex procedure, for example. We simulated the catheterization process, and using a headset, patients would wear the headset and go through the procedure, and they were taught what they would go through and what to expect, what outcomes to expect. And the reasoning behind this is that when you have an educated patient, generally, and there's evidence to indicate that the patient outcomes are generally better. So yeah, virtual reality, again, where you're immersing the user into a fully virtual world, whereas augmented reality, we're coupling the virtual world with the augmented world. Or in other words, we're augmenting the virtual world with real world imagery, or real world imagery with virtual imagery, I should say. And you can do some, in terms of training, medical training, augmented reality, I think has, bigger application than even virtual reality. And, anatomy education is a good example of that. And in this center picture here, the middle picture in this slide, you can see you're able to take your tablet, for example, overlay it on top of a patient, and you can, for example, look at their inside structure, okay, in the virtual domain. Virtual reality, just some examples here. Virtual reality, Stanford School of Medicine at Stanford University. One of the professors there, David Axelrod, he's been using, he uses virtual reality to visualize the pediatric cardiac heart. So trainees are able to see the heart in 3D. And by doing so, they're able to see the intricate structure and the connections between the components of the heart much better than they would if they were looking at a textbook and 2D images within a textbook. I've done a number of work in, again, as I pointed out, we've looked at a number of procedures, including fundoscopy and ophthalmoscopy using virtual reality and serious gaming to actually train how to use a fundoscope and look at the conditions of the eye. We've coupled 3D printing and open electronics, and we've devised a technique to train how to perform an epidural procedure in the virtual domain. And again, we're able to do this in a very cost-effective manner using consumer-level haptic devices, headsets, and some simple 3D electronics with an Arduino kit. Breakaway Games, again, just as an example, they've done some really incredible work in this domain, and they've created professional, tools that are available to, obviously for a price, though. Virtual patients in medical education are becoming a very big thing. We're able to I wouldn't say easily, but we're able to create these very realistic scenarios, patient and medical professional interactions in the virtual space, where the medical professional can take on the role of the trainee can take on the role of the medical educator and can interact with the patient. There's also studies that have shown that when you're using a medical, you have an avatar representing the medical professional, patients are inclined to be more honest and more open to the avatar instead of the real person. So some interesting work with avatars. So just to give you a little snapshot of, provided an overview of games, simulation games, play, and serious games, and hopefully motivated the benefits and the what we can do with them and how we can engage trainees. And I'm just going to conclude. And it wouldn't be, I think I'd have to talk about the COVID-19 pandemic and this shift to, over the past year and a half or so. I mean, it's kind of moving away from now, but nonetheless, we were thrown into the online education in general, including medical education, was thrown into the online domain, into the virtual domain. And virtual simulation has been, has really stepped up to the plate, and we were able to do a lot of things that we wouldn't be able to do if we didn't have virtual sims. We're able to practice a number of techniques, number of procedures in the virtual domain, given the closure of labs where these techniques would have been done previously. Now, it's not to say there are some issues, because it's very difficult to train psychomotor skills in the virtual domain. But when we couple that with 3D printing, we're able to do some pretty interesting things. Some of the work that, again, I've been doing with some colleagues at Ontario Tech University was coupling virtual training techniques together with learning management systems and physical simulators that we 3D printed, or task trainers that were 3D printed. We printed these simulators. Here it's an example for catheter insertion. Mailed the physical simulators that we 3D printed for a few dollars to each of the students. The students then practiced in the virtual domain first. They were able to then practice on the task trainer, video record themselves, place it online on the learning management system, and there they were able to discuss what they did with their colleague or with their fellow students, along with the professors and other experts. And they were able to critique each other and form this collaborative learning experience where they learn through each other's mistakes, for example. Just something else to consider, which I haven't talked about much, but this is a big issue, this whole notion of fidelity. How realistic do our simulations have to be? This is an open problem. But what we do know, or there is at least some evidence to indicate, that it really depends on the level of the trainee and what the task is trying to accomplish, what the goals of the game or the sim are. Typically, if you have a novice trainee, you don't need the very intricate and realistic, and high fidelity. Whereas if you're, a practicing, surgeon that's, practicing on some technique, you probably need higher fidelity. But again, an open problem. And I just want to point out that technology keeps improving, and there's a lot of opportunities. Maker spaces are a real big and growing thing right now, where we're able to 3D print, we're able to use open electronics, and coupling that together with these immersive, learning experiences, serious games, VR, AR, we're able to create some very, very engaging, very immersive, and motivating applications that are cost-effective and, provide a safe learning environment that is also available in many cases online, thus preventing access to labs, which can be expensive and costly to maintain and what have you. And just one other thing that I want to say before I quit, a lot of the serious games and the virtual training environments that we have currently, they're a one-size-fits-all solution, and they're one scenario and everyone uses them. Where we're moving to is having these frameworks or authoring tools where the educator is provided a lot more flexibility and is able to go in and modify the scenario to suit the needs of one or more specific students or a classroom or whatever the case may be. This is a growing area of research, and there's some interesting work done in that. But again, it's great to provide the educator with some flexibility to modify and tailor the simulation to their needs or the needs of their students. And finally, what I'll do is I just want to end by saying that I've provided a snapshot here. Technology can do some great things, But before we use the technology, we have to think about why we're using it. Okay. And I use the analogy of chocolate covered broccoli. Putting chocolate over broccoli, may look nice, but underneath it's still broccoli. When you bite into it, you're still going to bite into broccoli. So there has to be a lot of thought that goes into the design of these immersive applications. And we have to carefully consider our end users and also our goals. What are the goals of the sim or the game that I want to create? And keep in mind, too, that technology, we can do some great things with it, but a lot of times we still need some, good computing power. And the computing power may not necessarily be available. Like VR-ready laptops may not be available, or may not, every student may not have such a device lying around at home. So just keep that in mind. And finally, I'm going to say that I won't say it's the end, because of there's a lot of work that remains. And hopefully, for students that are in these, tech-related domains, there's a lot of opportunities here. And on that end, I'll say thank you. And if there's any questions, be happy to entertain them. And there's a question. So as a designer looking into expanding into the VR industry, are there any recommendations or hackathon events related in this field? I would definitely say there's a number of, and I can't think of them offhand, there's many hackathons and gaming such events. And I would recommend to any student or anyone interested in moving into this domain that you do look into them. There's, game, I forget the names of them. I know some of them in Canada where students come together and there's these hackathons and they're, 24-hour type hackathon, and they tackle a specific problem. Those are an excellent way to get immersed into this. And sometimes there's good prizes as well, and good recognition by big companies. The other thing that I would recommend is practice. And what I mean by practice is don't be afraid to get your hands dirty, so to speak, and just play with things, 3D print things. Look online. There's many projects that you can look at and you can do. Get a book on open electronics and just start building little projects. And there's tons of resources online. But the main thing is that you have to practice and jump into the field, so to speak. Another example, I have very limited experience with immersive educational technologies, but they seem like great ideas. But the tech always feels so laggy. Are they commercially available? Yeah, so this is a really good question, Elaine. And I agree, a lot of the work that is being done is very research-based, and it's done with universities and what have you. The situation is changing, thankfully, and there are companies that are focusing on more professional products. Now, the professional products, of course, there's a price associated with them. Breakaway Games is one example. There's other, smaller companies that are coming into play. In Canada, for example, there's Muralfit, a couple of other companies. So the situation is changing, and there are some professional products available. One of the issues that we have in terms of the products, we still need more studies, and we still need more effectiveness studies. That is changing, and there's plenty of research being done in that domain. But before this becomes even more widespread, we need effectiveness studies to show that these simulations do in fact work, or training in the immersive domain does in fact work. There is plenty of evidence to show that they do, but we need more. That's an area that's lagging as well. With the cost and time to develop a brand new VR program, can you please share the experience of assessing the ROI? Yeah, that's a great question. And again, what I'll go back and I'll say is that a lot of this work is being done, at the university level with hospitals. And that being said, it really is, a lot of the work, all the work that I do, for example, is really our time, very limited budget. I mean, there are some grants that are available from the government. But really a lot of it is, there is a time commitment from both the researchers on the tech side and of course the medical professionals. And that does become a problem because medical professionals in particular, a lot of them are very busy. They're performing surgeries. They have their clinical practices and what have you. So the situation is changing, but it does, as more companies jump into the domain, I think the return on investment, I think, is becoming more and more evident. I'm interested in how that's actually being used in. And psychiatry. Actually, psychiatry is a really good domain. Because you're able to have this dialogue between the patient and the medical expert, the medical professional taking on the role of the trainee taking on the role of the medical professional and interacting with an avatar. And there's actually a lot of work being done in this domain. I don't have references online, but I'd be happy to share some if you send me an email. And I know I'm running out of time, so I don't want to just trying to rush through here. So.
Okay, thank you so much, Prof. Kapelos. Yeah.
You're very welcome.
If you have any more questions, you can email Prof. From
Sure.
the email address that is shown on the screen. Okay. If not, next, we are pleased to have Dr. Bina Rai, Senior Lecturer of Biomedical Engineering from the National University of Singapore. She'll be sharing on why so serious games and learning. Dr. Bina, please.
Thank you so much, Billy. Let me start sharing my screen. Okay, I hope that you all can see this. Yes? Okay, so good afternoon and thank you for choosing to spend your lunch hour with us today. I'm basically, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you some of my personal experiences and really to showcase the range of serious games that are out there that you may not be aware of. I think, you would have heard quite a bit about simulations, right? So for example, the blood transfusion game, cannulation games and things like that. And so I'm hoping to actually show you that it's actually a very big field and it is important, and there's actually money in making such games as well. Okay, so I'm starting the slide here with these three pictures. So, I guess I'll give a shout out to Rolljack, right? So the company is called Kodomo, and this particular tool is called Rolljack, right? So these three pictures here are actually created by my students, right? Rolljack is a online collaborative innovation tool. So what I did was I gave them a problem statement, right? For example, how might we, motivate more seniors to exercise regularly, right? And then what they did was they were each of them individually with their devices, mobile phone, they would do a drawing. And then after a certain time is up, which you can define, we actually swap with the next person. So the next person then works on that current design, and you can swap for as many times as you want, for as long as you want. And finally, all of these will be up online, and everyone can actually vote. So there's a score, right? So you see there's a score of 238 versus 93. And so then you get someone whose design, the prototype is actually the best in a way, right? So I find that, because COVID-19 kind of, coerced us to move online in a lot of our delivery of material, I found this to be a very nice and playful, right, tool and a good example to show how, learning is happening because they're actually prototyping, right, without realizing it. Right, and it was fun. Okay, I'm not showing you the video today, but I actually videoed my students doing this online, and they were all laughing and having a ball of a time. Okay, so this is me. I'm Dr. Bina Rai. You can call me Bina. I'm a senior lecturer with the Biomedical Engineering Department, Faculty of Engineering, NUS. I also have an adjunct position at the N.1 Institute for Health, and I'm ACLP certified, and so I'm a certified, basically, adult educator. I teach an elective at NUS called Serious Games for Health, and so I'm quite passionate, in the field, in terms of teaching as well as research in serious games. Okay, you can reach me officially, Bieber@nus.edu.sg, or at my personal email address, missbina@gmail.com. Okay, you can also find me on LinkedIn, right? So if you have any questions or looking for collaborations, feel free to reach out to me. Okay, so I'm starting off with this big picture here, right? Because us being in Singapore and, having lived my entire life here, and I was born here, right? So gaming seems to have this very negative connotation, right? Which I'm sure you will agree. I mean, I think many of us are parents as well. And, when we think about our children spending many hours, video gaming, we feel guilty and bad, right? It's like, should they be playing? We should stop their playing. We should only allow them to play for 1-2 hours. There's that whole addiction and negativity involved with gaming, right? But that seems to be very, very culturally, a cultural aspect of it, right? For Singaporeans, right? If we look at, other parts of the world, right? So this, I'm not sure if you can guess, where do you think this man is from? Don't know if there's a chat function here, but yeah. So he's basically, if I'm not sure if you guessed correctly, but he's from the Netherlands. Okay, and the Netherlands are actually which I'll cover in my next 3 slides, very pro serious gaming, right? So there's gaming, which is for entertainment and fun. And then there's serious gaming, right? Which I think Bill covered very, very well and introduced, what exactly is serious gaming, right? Which is a game that has a specific learning objective. Okay. And because of that specific learning objective and purpose, the way you design and develop your game, it's actually quite a different process. Okay. But yes, gaming can be serious. Okay. It can be serious and still be fun at the same time. But the fun comes from a different mechanic. Okay. So now back to the Netherlands, right? So the Netherlands at the forefront from the beginning, Erasmus, and he lived from 1467 to 1536, right? So he was one of the first people to come up with this idea that, we should be learning while playing, right? And there are benefits to it, right? In fact, there's a university in the Netherlands that's named after him. Then shortly after, this is from the 1872 to 1945, Johan Huizinga. So this is actually a quote that I use as a signature of my email because I like it very much. So let my playing be my learning and my learning be my playing, right? So he took over Erasmus in a way and continued on to provide evidence of how, play can actually help in learning. Right. And then he went on to identify things, that, to be able to play, you need a space that you feel secure and embedded, and then he continues to define this kind of a space. And so when I actually went to the Netherlands, right, so I went to Eindhoven. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the place. That's where Philips comes from. Okay. So it was my first time. This was a few years ago. And I didn't realize that serious gaming was such a big thing, right? So it was full of people from Europe. Right. Everyone, with, of course, a big majority from the Netherlands themselves. Right. And I was really in awe of the kind of games that they've come up with. And the majority of these are immersive technology using virtual reality. Right. And they were fantastic. And not only were the games fun and serious, right, but the people were as well. Okay. They had that sense of humor, I guess, from maybe being brought up in a culture that, advocates learning by play. Right. And so in the Netherlands alone, right, you see of the 330 Dutch game industry companies, 57% is focusing on the development of serious games and 44% is working on them exclusively. Okay. So, if you are looking for inspiration, once this COVID thing becomes a little bit better and you can travel, try to attend a conference there, right? The conference that I attended was Games for Health. So I put it up there. You can actually Google it. I would actually highly recommend it. Okay. It'll give you a lot of ideas as well. So that was the Netherlands, right? But what about the rest of the world? So, I think Bill showed some statistics as well, but just to also highlight, right, that this is indeed true. And there's this global serious games market opportunities and forecast. And you can see that's expected to reach 9.167 million by 2023. Okay, there's definitely, and it's growing at 19.2%, which is quite significant, right? And the industries were identified, right, by application, and healthcare is definitely one of them, right? I mean, we all know that, in terms of simulations, they kind of stem out from aerospace as well, right? But healthcare is, I think, starting to catch on, and there's a lot more activity in terms of serious games development for healthcare. So for those of you who are starting out, right, it's always, I like this particular slide because it shows you, okay, what kind of a game would I be interested in designing, developing, or using, or adopting, right? So there are many different types of gaming in healthcare. The first category is cognitive and emotional, right? So cognitive refers to your cognitive ability or decline, right? Emotional can mean a number of things, right? So, for example, stress management, right? Stress management, mental health, things like that, okay? Then there's participatory health. Participatory health refers to, they show you a phone because it's usually over your mobile app, right? The delivery. It's diet, nutrition, right? So your nutrition, sleep, exercise, things like that, okay? Exergaming and fitness, so I think we're familiar with this, right? Like your Kinect. So for those of us who play, you can do all sorts of exercises and keep yourself fit, especially, if you're indoors. This is a fun way of actually promoting good health, right, by exercising. Also related to exergaming is your rehab games, right? So now instead of the person who is healthy, the rehab games are targeted clearly at someone who is injured and needs to restore that particular motor function again, right? So this is good for such things. It's a fun way of doing it as well. So in that picture here, the individual is actually bowling, okay? And finally, the one that I think you all are very familiar with is medical education and training, okay? So these are the different categories, and you can think about, which one, if you have anything in mind, which one would you actually use, and it's a good start from there. Now, I'll provide you with some examples, I guess mainly from the cognitive and emotional, and then one on participatory as well, that I've been exposed to, or I've personally done, or I'm actually involved in the research for. Okay, so this is one of the cognitive. So for cognitive ability, it's I will play this video first, and then I'll talk a bit about it. Let me share sound. That's our head of department, and he's part of this research group called Wisdom. This is the game that I've been talking about. Yeah, play this one.
S207. Tune your COM2 radio to frequency 130.725.
NASA 504, NASA 504. Tune your COM1 radio to frequency 127.550.
Okay, so this is actually called the MacD platform or game, and it's designed by Dean Ho, Yuan, Alexander, and I'm also just joined the team as well. And this game is actually originally, well, it is from NASA, right? And they follow that flight simulator kind of concept, right? To see whether can you track the play learner's ability for multitasking, right? And we're actually in the middle of writing IRB. We submitted the IRB, and we'd like to test this, on seniors to see whether they can complete multiple tasks in kind of an air flight control simulation. And it will serve as a form of cognitive profiling as a predictor of a disease onset and long-term. It also allow for long-term and remote monitoring management for chronic illnesses. Okay, so this is one of a snapshot of one of the games, it's a collaborative effort between BME faculty, N.1 Institute, and Wisdom. Okay. Now, the second one, this second example is more of emotional health and something called, I would say, empathy, right? Which I think empathy is also something that healthcare professionals are quite keen to train, right? And we know that to train empathy is actually a very difficult thing. So I had the honor of actually listening, and this is Gaurav Kirti, who is the co-founder of To Be You, this particular game. I'm not sure if you read the newspaper. So the Straits Times actually published this on National Day. And To Be You is basically a free online game that builds empathy, right? So he gave a guest talk to my students, and he gave us access to actually play. And so I did go into the shoes of Nadia over here, right? And went through, her journey as, as a Muslim female, right, in Singapore. So what I liked about this game was that it is so well designed, the game mechanics and the realisticness of it, right? Because it comes from actual scenarios and situations, right? So they actually studied their users very carefully and who they're actually depicting, right? Because this is important for you to then be able to train empathy. So I think this actually, it's a fantastic game, and it did manage to, to meet its learning outcome as well. So if you've not tried it, you might want to give it a shot as well. So it's 2bu.sg. Okay, so this one is for training empathy. Okay, now this is another game that, let me share sound again. Have a watch first. Let me stop sharing sound. Okay, so this is an interesting game that I actually found out about, and so I brought it to Singapore for my students to try. And we're actually starting, and I'm also starting a pilot project with SEDF for this particular game. What I like about it is it actually teaches you to manage your own stress, right? So what happens in the game is you have that little, the channel thingy that tells you, okay, it's like a clock, right? So it tells you, okay, you are going to stressful conditions, orange, red, right? Or you're cooling down, calming down, you're a calm state, and that's blue. And then you have to go through a series of obstacles. Now, some of these obstacles require you to be slightly stressed. Some of them require you to be calm, right? And this way, what they've shown is that by doing this a few times, you actually learn to manage your own stress mindset. Okay, and some stress is actually good for your performance and decision making, right? So that's the rationale here. And to play this, you basically, as you saw, they had a sensor that they put on their chest to measure their heart rate variation, and then we use Oculus headset, and that's about it. Just a little space. So this is actually a video of my student swimming through the obstacle. Yeah. But of course, the younger students are really very good at these things, and they managed to finish like the task very quickly. What is 20 minutes? What it was meant to be like 40 minutes, they did it in like 20 minutes, right? But the thing about this is, you can also become a coach for this particular game. And so you sit there and you provide certain hints and, guide the trainee along the way as well. Okay, so this is one game that allows you to, I guess, related to emotional health in that way. So your stress mindset. Okay, now this is a different game. Let's see what this is. Sorry, I'm sharing sound.
With one mysterious killer ravages freely across the earth.
Okay, so this one is called Perfect Reality, and I guess it's an example, a unique example of participatory health. It was designed actually to encourage or motivate people to monitor their symptoms during the COVID-19 period, right? And this one is actually designed by some of my students, right? And so this is one possible way as well. As you can see that the aesthetics is very different as well, right? So depending on, what kind of aesthetics and immersiveness you actually require, right? So something to think about as well. Okay, now this one is a slide borrowed from my colleague James, and so he actually does a lot of fantastic work in gerund technology and assistive technology devices and things like that. And this is part of one of the designs that his team and him has come up with. So using the game mechanics from Dance Revolution. I'm not sure if I think everyone would have seen this in the arcades, right? So his students and him actually designed something similar, and they for now have called it Happy Feet for the senior citizens, right? So a version that, is suitable for them, but also kind of motivates and encourages, exercising for them, right? So this is one example of, I guess, exergaming. Okay. Let me play. Yeah. Okay. This is, I think this is my final slide. So I didn't want to go into the medical training and the medical training bit because, I think that's something that you're very familiar with, right? The fact that, I think many of you, rightfully so, are trying to recreate that environment. So the flight simulator for medical and health professionals. I'm putting in this particular one, not that I'm associated with them in any way, but I really like them. ABCDE Sim. And I've heard Ronald Laninga speak as well about this particular simulation, and I find it to be very useful, and it's very designed very well, and he has achieved validation and accreditation, which is quite rare for medical training games, right? There are not many that have been validated, so something that you all can look up and see. He has a few different scenarios as well. So Basically, he has one, I think, for younger kids, so pediatrics. He has one for burn victims and etc. Right? So something you can Google and look up as well. So I wanted to mention one more. So because I teach bioanalytical methods and I use a lot of lab simulations, right? There's this TED talk. I'm only going to play that 1 minute for you. Let me go to 2 minutes 40. If you want to listen to, the rest of it, just Google it. But otherwise, it's this part here that I would like you to listen to right now.
Just apply that to science. Why not build a virtual laboratory simulator? Well, we did. We basically set out to create a fully simulated one-to-one virtual reality laboratory simulator where the students could perform experiments with mathematical equations that would simulate what would happen in a real-world lab. But not just simple simulations. We would also create advanced simulations with top universities like MIT to bring out cutting-edge cancer research to these students. And suddenly the universities could save millions of dollars by letting the students perform virtual experiments before they go into the real laboratory. And not only that, now they could also understand, even on a molecular level inside the machine, what is happening to the machines. And then they could suddenly perform dangerous experiments in the labs as well. For instance, also here, learning about Salmonella bacteria, which is an important topic that many schools cannot teach for good safety reasons. And we, of course, quiz the students and then give the teachers a full dashboard so they fully understand where the students are at.
Okay. Let me stop sharing sound. Yes. So basically, the reason why I'm sharing about Labster is because I've used it for many years, and my students actually really enjoy the experience. The good thing about it is it's on a desktop, right? So it's actually WebGL version. So you don't need a headset because, for education, it's tough to have so many headsets and everyone to do it at the same time, right? So all they need are their laptops. And we actually, I can actually get them to do the entire experiment as compared to if I were to just plan for an actual physical experiment where, they may or may not see the end results depending on their skills. Right. And the thing is, I make this available for them even after class, so they can keep on trying before the exam. Right. So there are quite a number of benefits with using lab simulations to learn certain methodologies, analytical methodologies as well. Okay. If any of you are actually training your students in that. So I think with that, that was my final slide. I hope that, you found this interesting. And, my purpose was really not to give you a lecture on what serious games are, but more to kind of increase that awareness of the different types of games and possibilities. And hopefully this inspires you in your respective game design as well. So thank you very much.